We continue our series with the legendary Grandmaster Judit Polgar here, moving on to 2003 for a battle against another world champion, Anatoly Karpov. Judit, I think we have to start right there. We have seen a game in this video series where you took on Garry Kasparov and talked a lot about what that battle entailed. What was it like facing Karpov, both on the board, off the board? Any stories you have there about the personality that in many ways was maybe kind of the opposite of Garry?
Absolutely. He was a very great legend. And I have to tell you that when I was a kid, I was a big fan of Kasparov and I was rooting for him. He was young, he was there, he was fighting against Karpov. And of course, I liked his style much better because I like this tactical, attacking, straightforward way of playing. And I was not appreciating much Anatoly Karpov's play. Somehow it was long, boring. Somehow I didn't understand what he was doing really in those long games. But later on, of course, I understood a lot that what he was doing, he was a magician in somehow shuffling his pieces here and there, optimizing them continuously. And somehow, whenever there is action and tactics going to be happening, his pieces are just standing in the best spot.
Yeah.
As a person, of course, he was also different just as much as his style in chess. I believe that he was more of a diplomatic politician kind of person, contrary to Garry, who is very straightforward in communication and also at the board.
Yeah.
And I had interesting that the first game I played against Karpov, it was back 1992. I was just 16 years old in Madrid. I was playing with the white pieces. And he had a very different approach to chess than Garry. For example, with black, he didn't mind to make a draw. And I think we played Caro-Kann. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was Caro-Kann exchanging some of the pieces. And then there was a repetition in move 15-16. So I was kind of surprised. He won the tournament. He won most of his white games. I became second in that tournament. And later on, we played many games in rapid events, in blitz events, in classical games, and later on we were actually working together also for a short time. Well, not
Okay.
so short, but he was visiting in Hungary to our summer house several times, and we made preparations. But those times were already when he was not training as much.
Yeah.
And interesting that at some point when I was playing him, it was very clear that he was so busy with other things from chess that he was only having these special training camps focusing on chess. But you could see him that even in his later years, he was playing exceptionally well, even
Yeah.
if he was doing very many other things.
Yeah. It's amazing. Do you feel like working with someone whose style, as you said, was different than yours and maybe not one that you grew up idolizing initially? Was that a what would you say you got out of working with Karpov in those sessions?
Well, first of all, to work with someone like Karpov, even if it was not his peak year, only, well, it was somewhere, when was it? 2007, 2008, in those years we were working together. Of course, to work with someone like that, everything what he says, it has simply a different value than if the same things would have been said by someone else, right?
Right.
So, of course, the stories, the experiences, the understanding of the position. What is also very interesting with those very, very, very strong players and legends, that sometimes they just calculate and see things or strategically, and then they say, okay, in 20 moves it will be important here, 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 and here. So they visualize things in a very much long term, especially
Yeah.
Karpov. He was
Yeah.
very much able to do making a small move here, a small move there.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
then I had some awful experiences with him, for example, in tournament. In 2000, we played a long game. It was drawish. But this typical thing with Karpov, he's going around 5 times in a drawish position. It was 3 pawns against 2 on one side with rook and knight on the board. So it is a draw. But we had 25 minutes. It was over move 60. And then, he's playing this move, he's repeating moves here and there, going back and forth with very serious face. And then somehow you go down on time. Suddenly he made some magic with some of the pawns, going here, going there. Suddenly you're in trouble, no time, and lost. So that was, I think many people had this scenario with him, which is absolutely frustrating, I must say. Sitting there for 7 hours, you think until almost the very end that it's going to be a draw, we are just fighting it out, and then actually you lose the game.
It's amazing.
But this year, when I was winning this game, which I'm going to be showing, this was somewhere in October, this event. And in January, I won already a very beautiful game against him. That was not the first one, but actually that was the first classical game which I won in 2003, Vaikanze, which was also a pretty good game. That one I won with the black pieces.
Well, let's dive right in on that note. And you talked about the prototypical frustrations that people often felt when facing Anatoly Karpov, but this was a game, started with a Petrov and ultimately became a great one for you. So I'll let you kind of steer the ship. Were you prepared for the Petrov you got here on the board?
Oh, absolutely. With Karpov, he was playing the Petrov already, and before he played quite a few times against me, French and Caro-Kann. And of course, all three systems, usually Karpov is playing as a rock-solid way. So it's very difficult to crack. And of course, this position I had many, many times in that period of my career. And, you're just analyzing it hour after hour, day by day, weeks by week. And then you always try to come up with some new idea. But if we go further in this knight c6 is one of the main idea, this system.
This is all theory so far, and it was what you kind of expected maybe in your prep.
Yes, this is what he was playing, the knight c6, knight b4, trying to catch the bishop. On d3, of course, I move back. I don't give the white square bishop. Castle and a3. Knight c6 going back. C takes d5. Queen d5, knight c3, knight c3, bc3. So this is kind of a basic position of this line, of this knight c6 line. Here there are several options for black. More common is bishop f5, for example. In this position, one of the main ideas, apart from developing properly, is not to allow rook b1, because rook on b1 in this system is very commonly placed. So bishop f5 is one of the main move, and knight a5 is the other one. The knight a5 move, of course, has a very clear message that I don't want you to play c4. And of course, if black can manage to play knight c4 to blockade even with b5 later on, then black has a kind of an advantage already on the queen side.
Right.
And it's a very tricky system, actually. But after knight c5, I think white plays either rook b1 or bishop d3, rook e1, of course. It's always the same moves which you alternate. Rook b1, rook e1, bishop d3, and of course knight e5, if you can centralize your knight. That can be also very good if you can keep it there as well.
Okay. So those are those are the prototypical plans, but Karpov goes different here.
He went queen d6, which was either a novelty or something very rare. I think on top level it was not played. The idea is simple. It has two ideas. Not to allow bishop f4 to develop from my side. And the other idea is simply not to have c4 with the tempo. So it makes sense. At the same time, it moves away from the white square, so it doesn't have the control anymore on the white squares, which can be the danger for white. That's what I have to look after in such a position. So after queen d6, it was already new for me. I played rook b1.
So he surprised you first here. So this was he was kind of bringing a novelty to the table.
Yes, but you have to understand that when you play an opening, it's very important also for amateurs to understand, especially nowadays, that you have your database of, let's say, only 12 million games. Some people have 20, I don't know. And then you think of something, you pick a line, you look some of the games of the top players, let's say, it's fashionable, why shouldn't I be playing? And then you start looking at it, you understand the first 10 or 12 moves, how people are playing it, but you don't necessarily empower yourself with the knowledge of the typical plans, where
Right.
your pieces has to be located in order to be like Karpov, that when there is action, it's just standing on the best spot.
Right.
And in this position, what are typical improvement for white, for example, it's rook b1, rook e1, playing h3,
Hmm.
bishop d3, possibly c4 if you have the opportunity, thinking always to play knight e5, also rook b2, rook e2, doubling on the e5. So you have your kit tool in every opening, what you have, and you have to mix them in whatever order, depending how you feel, depending what is really happening on the board exactly in that situation. So why I played rook b1, let's say, and not h3 first? The reason is because now after rook b1, the black bishop is tied down to the b7 pawn. So I keep it there. I don't allow it to be moving out to f5 because then I just capture the pawn.
Right.
Also, I can give a hint already that with rook b1, it's not only that it stands better on the open file, but sometimes you go to b5 and you give some unpleasant, taking some squares away from black and controlling the fifth rank. It can be sometimes interesting. I personally love these things, but it works very rarely. It works well, I must say, if black plays well the system. So black played b6. Very logical, right? He wants to free his bishop. And also b6 generally fits to this kind of position. So, for example, in this position, we would never think of rook b8.
Right.
I mean, of course, nowadays, if any of the engine says rook b8, everybody will take it seriously, I understand. Because maybe in 8 moves, b5 will happen in one move.
Right.
But okay, I don't want to analyze rook b8, just generally saying that rook b8 does not come to mind to Karpov, but b6 does because he just wants to play bishop f5, and he wants to keep also freeing his rook to bring to d8 or e8 later on.
Right.
So now I continued with another very typical move, rook e1. I still have my bishop front of me, but I'm not sure where I want to put my bishop. I know that I want to have my rook on e1 for sure, but I'm not sure I want to have my bishop on d3, or after b6, there is also a very typical pattern that you might use this opportunity to play bishop b5 because the c6 knight is not protected by the bishop.
Right.
So chess is a very logical game and you have to know that after every move by your opponent, there are new opportunities and there are very little changes. But if you understand those, then you can outsmart your opponent, which not all the time happens, I must say. And now bishop e6.
You're making it sound so easy, but in a good way. I mean, it's awesome to hear your thought process of how you describe the communication of the pieces here.
Well, trust me, it's not easy and as simple during the game at all either. But it has a logic.
Yeah.
And I always say to everybody that watch out for your unprotected pieces. So which is an unprotected piece is the b1 great rook of mine. This is why, for example, bishop g4 was an idea, and I want to share this line because I think it's interesting to see the ideas what unexpectedly arises in such a position. Because let's say obviously, or not obviously, but I would like to play h3.
Right.
And for example, if bishop h5, then I would go rook b5. So I'm kind of putting pressure on the fifth rank. And you see the white squares like d5 square there. I mean, I can imagine playing bishop c4, rook d5.
Right.
Or some other ideas. But what I want to show is that after h3, there would be a concrete tactics by playing bishop h3. Takes, queen g6. And now you can also think, well, where should I put my king, right? h2, I don't want to put because bishop d6. On h1 is safe, f1. I don't know. But actually it makes a big difference whether you put your king on h1 or f1, but it comes out only in several moves later. because it's
Okay.
important that we keep protected the f2 pawn.
Wow.
So, okay,
I
king
can't wait to
f1
see
is
where
the
this goes.
move.
Okay.
Queen takes b1. And now bishop d3. This bishop is mostly going between d3 and b5. But now bishop b5 was not possible yet. So I go
Yep.
bishop d3 first. And queen a1. If queen a2, then actually if queen a4 was the strong move.
And the knight has to defend the
And
bishop.
you see that the b6 move allows me to have these kind of tactics because the c6 knight can be vulnerable. And
Pawns can't go backwards.
queen d5 is not possible to bishop e4.
Okay.
And if queen a1, then I cannot go queen a4 because queen c3. So here I go bishop b5. And again, you see the c6 knight is vulnerable there.
Yeah.
And I gain back another piece. And there is some line where queen on a2, and then the f2 pawn would be under attack. And that's why I have to have my king on f1.
Makes sense. In fact, we can even just show that if queen a2 already in lines like this, there would have been queen f2 if the king had been on h1.
At some point, yes.
Maybe. Okay.
Actually, not in this line, in some other line, but generally. So these are things which you have to keep in mind sometimes. And I like these connections in a game. So this was kind of a tricky idea, but it would not work for black.
Got it.
But with Karpov, it's also interesting that many times he's just not thinking about the tactics. He looks the position in a very strategic way. For example, we played once my first game in 94 against him. And unfortunately, I made a very bad opening positionally. And he could take a pawn. He was not even realizing that, I think. He just controlled all the squares. And he was not bothering with the pawn. Come on, no, I don't care. I just torture you and win the game on the white squares.
I think I was given a proverb or I don't remember if it was from one of my coaches or they said like the scariest pawn that exists is the pawn Karpov doesn't take. That's the scariest pawn because it really emphasizes all the things. So
I didn't hear this one, but it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened? Bishop e6. And now I improved my piece, bishop d3. So you see it becomes very clear that where I'm putting my pieces. The bishop on c1, it can stay in this system for a long time unless I cannot put it on f4. Because it defends on a3 the pawn. At the same time, it is very good for attack also for knight g5.
Right.
Knight g5 is something I would be playing. Bishop d2 anyway wouldn't make sense. So it's defending and attacking kind of from in its initial square. And now Karpov played rook a e8. Of course, it's also tricky because I think there is so many openings where you can have a huge debate where to put your rooks, right? I mean, in this position also you can argue that maybe rook d8 is better or rook fe8 is better. But if rook a d8, for example, then definitely I want to go knight g5. And once there is an exchange bishop g5, then I would attack immediately the d8 rook. So this is why it was not so advisable to go there, I believe.
Okay.
And now I started my plan. I was kind of happy and well, h3 is also a logical move to play in this position because it will be useful anytime. At the same time, you have to be careful with time. Knight a5 is a typical move and then play controlling the c4 square, playing possibly c5. Instead of knight a5, also bishop f6 is very logical after h3. It's a game. It's a game. Right. It's a good middle game, but I found this idea of rook b5. And somehow I was very happy. First of all, I wanted something extremely simple, to go d5, because black would not be able to take it because rook takes and bishop h7 tactics.
Yep.
I'll show it
if the rook
would be, yes, thank you.
Quickly show bishop takes h7 and you win the queen. So that's the concrete threat of rook b5.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you think about it, if the rook would have been going to d8, I don't have this in mind because it's just not threatening, right? So
Right.
it's always we have to play with the ideas. Instead of rook b5, by the way, knight d2 is a plan which you could consider to regroup the knight to e4. This is also sometimes pretty interesting because rook b5, I can't say it's a killing move. What black played, in that case, it was good.
Right.
Because Karpov played knight a5. Well, this can happen that he played this bad move for two reasons. First of all, because this was his plan originally. And the other part could be that d5 was a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But a6 was an interesting idea. Of course, I had my plan after
A6 or
a6.
H6. Okay. Got it.
a6.
Oh, A6. Got it. Okay.
a6. No, actually, it's tricky when black is moving the pawns h6 or g6. It's understandable, but we never forget that pawns never go backwards.
Right.
Okay? Because actually after h6, if you asked
Instead.
already, sorry to jump here and there, rook e6 is something very strong positionally. Because queen e6 doesn't work to d5, and two pieces are more than a rook, or f takes e6, already you regretted that you played h6 because of the white squares, let's say queen e2, queen a4.
Yeah.
And this is something that Vichy, let's say, would love to play. And would, without a second of hesitation, he would sacrifice the rook like that. Actually, in later years of mine, I would too, for positional compensation. So let's go to a6 just for short. Because I had my idea to go knight g5 here.
Mm. Knight to, you said g5?
Yes. Because after a takes b5, I have a move rook e6, I think.
Wow. Okay, wow. And
F takes e6, bishop h7, and queen h5. And if bishop g5, then bishop g5. And even though I have not much material, I'm still doing good.
Okay, amazing.
Very good, I must say.
Yeah. Look, you're doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but the problem is that, of course, I was extremely enthusiastic to play some spectacular moves like that. But the problem is black can just simply take on g5. And after takes, there is a concrete idea of bishop b3.
Oh, wow. Discovery on the back range.
And I'm not going to give mate. And the problem is it's just positional, queen d2. And black takes advantage of a6 and plays b5. And suddenly it becomes extremely positional. I don't have my tactics of killing, it seems. And if black has the time, then he's going to be later on playing knight a5, controlling the c4, d5 square with the bishop and knight.
Okay.
And at one point he can also go g6. Okay, so a6 was the move which had to be played because of this. But he did not play that. He played knight a5. And because he wanted to control already. So if I go knight g5, then he's just capturing and he's already controlling the c4, for example. I think he can go bishop c4 or bishop b3. Yeah.
Got it.
But after knight a5, with the last move of black, I have new opportunities. So I went rook e5 because it's not protected anymore. Which is not a usual way of regrouping the rook, but at the same time, it is very clear that it favors me what happened in the last two moves, right? My rook from b1 became centralized and very active.
Yeah.
And now, interestingly enough, Karpov went back to c6 because he realized that this is something not funny at all what happened. And in this position, of course, my first thought was to sacrifice rook e6. And probably objectively saying, it is... I should have done that, I believe. Rook e6 and takes queen c2, making weaknesses, and after h6, bishop b5. So again, you see that the b6 has its problems forever.
Yeah.
Again. And on the white squares, it's extremely difficult to play with black. My idea is to play bishop h6, sacrificing already, threatening with queen e4 already, and of course not to talk about queen g6 and bishop d3 back.
Right.
So it's a huge compensation. But I was also tempted that, well, if I go back rook e2, I want two tempes. So why should I sacrifice my exchange?
Yeah, you basically took the rook from b1 to e2 in one turn.
Yeah, exactly. So this was also tempting. And I thought I play without sacrificing material. And now it's not so easy to play with black, actually, because bishop f6 is not possible due to an immediate tactics, because I can go d5.
We have a pin.
And queen d5, bishop h7, and there is a pin. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So
there
are different tactics because of the pin on the e-file. Of course, after bishop f6, d5, there is still rook d8, some tactical idea for black, and then possibly I take on h7, king h7, queen c2, and then I grab on e6. And white has a better position. So this was kind of painful, I think, for black, that he was not able to play bishop f6, because bishop f6 is a very common move, especially to control the e5 square. And the other idea behind it to make for white more difficult to play c5, d5, because that's also one of my plans.
Right.
So he played bishop d7. But then I started to push d5. I couldn't resist. Because gaining space in this kind of position, it's also a great thing. So he went back to a5. He's going back and forth. Now I did not play the best move. The best move was probably queen c2. First, to provoke black's weakness, because black cannot go g6, very important because of bishop h6. So poor rook is trapped. And only after h6, only after that to play knight e5. And then possibly finally I can develop with bishop f4.
Right.
And the problem is for black that bishop f6 is not possible in this position because of bishop h7 and knight f7 tactics.
Booyah.
So these two extra moves, having my rook on e2 doubling, it's useful.
They're paying off, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But instead of queen c2, I played inaccurately and I played knight e5, which was also extremely logical, of course. Bishop f6. Bishop f4. So this is move 22. And finally I developed my bishop. But it was still playing, right? Because sometimes I had this idea of knight g5, and in some lines, bishop h6 in one move was there as a killer. So we can't say that the bishop was unused completely before this.
Right. And it's hard to be upset with the current position with every piece poised here, right? In the center and on the e-file, so.
At the same time, you know what is very annoying in the Petrov? That sometimes even when you think that you have a great position, it's by far not as good as it seems.
Right.
With accurate play for black.
Yeah.
Okay, so bishop e5. Bishop takes e5. Of course, rook e5 was also something to consider, but that's another story. I wanted to keep my my rooks.
Yeah.
But this bishop e5, I'm sacrificing kind of a pawn. Because black took on a3, which was not the best move, by the way. The best move was to play queen c5. Because somehow black has not so much time. For him, it was much more important to make sure that if I play rook e3, let's say, opening up the ideas for my queen, for my rook on the third, g6. And this is what I refer to, that sometimes it looks much better than it is. Because
Right.
if visually you say, from my queen, I just give a checkmate on g7. Or
Right.
before that, I just put my queen on f6. But you don't necessarily have the time to do so. And if I
Right.
don't have the time, then actually my pawn structure on the queen side is very weak. So I have to be extremely careful what I'm doing and how.
Okay.
So this was the best move for black, but Anatoly was greedy and took my pawn. He thought he just grabs it and then saves his king side. And now I like my move quite a lot. Maybe he was also considering that I must take on c7, which was a possibility, but I was not even thinking about that.
Right.
I was not even considering, so I played rook e3.
A taste of his own medicine. The best pawn is the one you didn't take, right?
Yeah.
The legendary Karpov. Yeah.
And after rook e3 is not so easy for black. You know what other idea I had, which I think I was not considering, only later I realized it. Instead of rook e3, d6 was something to consider. That was a very interesting move. Because c takes d6, again the tactics of winning the queen by bishop d6.
Yep, can't take.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his problem is that rook e5 would be very logical to give an exchange. And after rook e5, queen d6. But rook d5. Exactly. You knew it.
Yeah.
And
I'm
taking the rook.
spotting it because I
Yeah.
have the confidence of you here. So I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah,
But you know, it's so funny. We had this tactics when the queen was on d5 and the queen is on d6, and in the last line when the queen was on d7. So it's the same pattern, right?
Yep. Okay, so this would have been hard too. I mean, probably he has to move the c pawn or something, but your position is just
Yeah, so
very
d6 was actually the best move, but I had a huge temptation and idea in mind. So I went rook e3. And I like those kind of moves which has several ideas at the same time. And this has, because rook g3 can be very powerful, but at the same time the queen from d1, which also did not move in this game yet, when it moves, it will hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the idea of rook e3. And very strangely enough, now Karpov blundered huge. And he allowed me to do some kind of tactics, which is from the 18th century.
I was going to say, it's a puzzle book tactic.
Yeah, it was by Lasker, played in the late 18th centuries in Amsterdam. And I just couldn't believe it that he played it, you know? I mean, it feels like he just lost the sense of danger completely. Completely. He just thought that, okay, nobody can checkmate him.
Yeah.
Where he was very wrong, because he played queen c5. The best move was to play g6.
Yeah.
And frightening, but white is not killing immediately. Obviously, I have a huge counterplay and compensation. I think h4 is one of the best move, and to go with h5. But white has full compensation for the pawn. That's no question.
I keep wanting to make, like, I want to do things like this, but I know it doesn't work. Everything to break through, but
I'm telling you, it looks better than it is.
yeah.
Because you want to play moves like queen h5, but you can't.
Right. Yeah. Okay, but still, this would have been great, and obviously white has a very, very dangerous attack. So
yes, yeah, and it's not fun to play with black. It's pretty scary, but g6 must have been played. And queen c5, which I was shocked, and most of the people who were around in the hall, because I just took bishop h7. These kind of tactics I knew by h7.
Right. And
and I thought it happens only in the 18th century.
Right. He didn't fully let you complete the tactic, but we'll show it to the end of the next move on king g8 here.
Yes, because he resigned in this position. Obviously, he didn't want to be beauty prized, this one. So king g8, then I go bishop g7. And if king g7, then rook g3. and queen g5 checkmate.
Very nice. The double bishop sacrifice to destroy someone's king side is the thing you teach kids to show them how exciting chess can be, and that one day you might have a puzzle like this in your game, right? But who knew it would happen? There you go.
And this tournament, well, with this game, later on I won the tournament. I won the tournament ahead of Ivan Sokolov, Karpov, and Aronyan at the time.
Oh wow.
He was good, but not a top 10 player yet. Only a very good international grandmaster.
The up and coming Aronian. Well, that was amazing. Who knew that you would beat a world champion with a sacrifice like you said that you learned when you were 7. But how was the game afterwards? And we talked about the sporting element of facing Kasparov, how intimidating he was, and the entire dynamic of the aura, right, of beating Gary. What was it like taking down Karpov here?
Well, you can imagine it was a very satisfying feeling to win against him, and then secondary to win this way against him. It was great, and it was extremely tasty that I won already in that year another game against Karpov, so it was definitely a clear improvement for me. And, well, of course, Karpov, whenever he lost a game like that, he shook hands and left. Ran out.
Okay.
I think in this they were similar with Gary. In the reactions after a loss. But he was okay afterwards. Obviously, nobody is very happy to lose this kind of this way. So already when he left and then he goes for a walk in the evening, we were seeing each other. It's already everything was normal.
Yeah. And as you shared, you obviously would go on to work with Karpov later in sessions that were awesome, as you shared at the start of the video. So good stuff. And I think on that note, we'll let the fans know there is much more good stuff coming up. After this, we jump ahead to the year 2009, where Judit once again takes on the white pieces against Boris Gelfand at the World Cup. We will see you in the next video, fans.